Hello, I'm Black Bright News, and I don't know if you've seen the news headlines about the army conscripting. Well, not conscripting, but 65-year-olds may be recalled into the army. So, because I've got to keep this concise and I'm doing it in 10 minutes and I'm doing it during my lunch break, I've got to follow my script. So, just pretend it's a bedtime story. So veterans could be called up at 65 in new rules for war. It's a line that immediately creates an image of individuals with joint replacements, aches and pains, being called to fight a war. People picture retired men and women long out of uniform suddenly being pulled back into service and pushed towards danger. That reaction is understandable, but what is actually being discussed is not a plan to conscript pensioners and not a sudden policy shift aimed at everyday civilians. It's a review of mobilisation rules that apply specifically to people who have already served. Veterans who were trained, who operated within military systems, and who, in some cases, remain on reserved lists long after leaving full time service. The focus is on whether age limits, written decades ago, still make sense in a world where people live longer, stay mentally sharp longer, and where modern warfare relies far more on technical skill, logistics, planning, cyber capability, training, and institutional memory than it does on sheer physical endurance. From the defence planning point of view, this is about options, not intent. Governments tend to write laws for worst case scenarios, not everyday use. Large scale war planning is deliberately uncomfortable because it deals with situations most people hope will never happen. Recent conflicts have exposed how quickly personnel skills and experience can be exhausted, even in well resourced forces. When planners look at that, they don't just see tanks and ammunition, they see gaps in knowledge, people who know how systems work because they built them, ran them, fixed them, and taught others how to use them. From that perspective, recalling older veterans is not about frontline combat, it's about depth. A former engineer might be more useful in a maintenance facility than a young recruit still learning the basics. A retired logistics officer can keep supply chains moving. A former medic can train and supervise younger staff. A modern military runs on brains as much as bodies, and age alone doesn't disqualify someone from contributing meaningfully in a crisis. For many veterans and their families, this headline doesn't land as preparedness, it lands as something else entirely. It feels like the rules changing after the fact. You've served, you've accepted the risks, you've lived with the consequences, and you were told there was an end point. The suggestion that obligation might stretch into old age reopens doors people have worked hard to close, especially those managing long term injuries, chronic pain, or the psychological weight that often follows service. Even when recall is unlikely, the existence of the power matters. It changes how people feel about what they've already given. It also raises practical concerns that can't be brushed aside. A 65-year-old body is different from a 35-year-old one, no matter how experienced the mind. That means any serious mobilisation planning has to be selective, medically grounded, and role specific. A blunt age extension without nuance would create more problems than it solves. And when people hear this proposal, some don't hear preparedness at all, they hear scarcity. What they're really asking quietly is whether enough younger people are coming through. Recruitment has been under strain across the UK and much of Europe for years. Few young people apply, more drop out during training, and more leave earlier than expected. Some of that is about pay, career flexibility, and culture change. But some of it is psychological, and that's where the unease grows. The military now recruits from a society that carries higher levels of reported anxiety, depression, trauma, and emotional strain than in previous generations. That doesn't mean young recruits are weak, it means they are starting from a different baseline. Add the effects of adverse childhood experiences, disrupted education, economic pressure, social media saturation, and a near constant sense of crisis, and many arrive already stretched. For a lot of young people who are struggling at home, the army didn't just look like a job, it looked like order, a bed, meals, clear rules, a way out of chaos, independence without having to negotiate it. And if you're coming from a home where adults are unreliable, violent, absent, or overwhelmed, that promise is incredibly powerful. So when stories surface about drug use within forces, whether arrests failed tests or internal concerns, people don't just hear misconduct, they hear coping. Drugs are widely understood as pressure valves, not party favours. Those stories raise uncomfortable questions about what people are being asked to absorb and whether the support structures are keeping pace with the demands being placed on them. The army has long functioned as both an opportunity and an escape hatch. The question now is whether enough is done to ensure people genuinely understand what they're escaping into and whether the support continues once the uniform comes off. What the army gives you in structure always comes tied to things you cannot really see at the start. It's easy to understand rules, routine, and teamwork. It's much harder to understand what constant pressure feels like, what it does to you to live under authority in high-stress situations, or how being trained for violence can change the way you think, even if you've never sent into combat. At 16, 17 or 18, most people don't yet have the life experience to picture that clearly, especially if hardship already feels normal to them. Against that backdrop, the idea of drawing on older veterans can look less like desperation and more like an attempt to stabilise a system under strain. Older veterans often bring something that isn't easily trained: emotional containment, perspective and familiarity with fear, boredom, loss and responsibility. In certain roles, that steadiness can matter as much as physical capability. That doesn't mean older veterans should be treated as an endlessly extendable resource. It does mean the conversation is about more than age. It's about resilience, distribution of risk, and how institutions adapt when the society they draw from has changed. What does a society owe those who have already served? Is it fair to widen the boundaries of obligation while long-standing issues around veteran healthcare, housing and long-term support remain unresolved? Some veterans hear this headline and think there is always imagination and urgency when it comes to recalling service, but far less when it comes to sustaining people afterwards. It's worth noting that even among older veterans, views are not uniform. Some would not automatically refuse a narrowly defined recall in a genuine national emergency, particularly in advisory or training roles. But even there, the boundaries are clear. No open-ended commitments, no frontline assumptions, no casual expansion of duty without reciprocal care. History suggests that the gap between who could be recalled and who would be recalled is large. Modern militaries are pragmatic. They don't benefit from unwilling, unfit or resentful personnel. Capability, health, relevance and consent matter far more than age written into law. So the real significance of this headline isn't that 65-year-olds are about to be sent back to war. It's that governments are quietly revisiting old frameworks in a more unstable world. And in doing so, they're brushing up against unresolved tensions about duty, care and trust. Those tensions won't be resolved by legislation alone. They'll be resolved by clarity about roles, limits and safeguards, and by whether veterans feel respected rather than stretched. Preparedness isn't just about having names on a list. It's about maintaining a relationship with the people who have already given more than most. That's what this headline is really asking us to think about. So I'd like to think I provide context-led analysis with a human interest focus. This commentary reflects current discussions around mobilisation frameworks and does not indicate imminent policy changes or compulsory recall. So I just wanted your thoughts on what you think now of 65-year-olds being recalled into service. It could be your mum, your dad, your granddad, your grandmother. Your thoughts would be appreciated. And I'll speak to you again soon. You take care now. Bye-bye.